Jerry B. Roberts interviewing for the Oklahoma Historical Society and the Living Legends. The date is October the 13th, 1977. Thank you.
Said, Peter Piper picked a peck of pickled peppers. Well, the fellow said, that's the greatest thing I've ever heard of in my life. John, it's wonderful. He said, yeah, but it's kind of hard to work into an ordinary conversation. So I hope that I'm supposed to be able to speak real well. I have problems, my wife tells me. We play duplicate bridge, and if there's anything that'll separate a family in a hurry. She tells me rules all day long, you know, about what you can't do and what you can do. And I know one of the rules is that when I make a lead, and she goes, then that's not in it. That's a signal. And some night I'm going to sit up the opposition and tell them when she does that, call her on it. Because it takes the heart out of me. I play the rest of the game, I don't know what I'm playing. Because I hate to make her mad. I know I'm going to pay for it later. Let's see, basically, I want to say this. If I don't say anything else today, remember one thing, the railroads are here to stay. And I wish that I were about 25 years old, I'd go right back into business. Because we haven't even begun to do the things that are going to be done in the next 20 years with railroads. Just a few facts, and I scribbled these down. I like to give a talk without reading, but sometimes the figures, if you don't read it, you're a little wrong in what you put out as facts. Right now we have 373 railroads in the United States. That's all of them, every size and variety. Of those, there's 48 that we call Class 1 railroads, like the Santa Fe and the Union Pacific, Southern Pacific, and all those that we know so well. The rest of the lines are all very small. St. Louis Terminal Railroad, Sepulveda Union, you know, little lines like that make less than $10 million gross income a year. We run every day in this United States in freight trains, 10,100 freight trains a day. You know, most people don't realize that, and that's why we have this awful problem of accidents and crossings. So many folks think, well, we're out of business, and there's never a train goes by. Maybe you never do see one, but that one time that you don't watch is the time that you're going to have trouble. But there's 10,100 freight trains every day that move in the United States. 384 passenger trains. Now, you wouldn't think that. We only have one that goes through here. That's on the Santa Fe, and it's Amtrak, really, a government-owned subsidy is what it is. So we do have 384. Now, that includes the commuter trains back east, too. In the country, there's 200,000 miles of mainline railroad. Now, that's an awful lot of mileage. The country's only 3,000 miles wide. There's 200,000 miles of main lines and about another 100,000 of all related lines. In the United States, we have a family of 525,000 people directly working for the railroad. Now, when you take in the retired people from the railroad, we've got 1.3 million. And there's an awful lot of retired folks in railroading, and I'm going to be one after December 31st. But we're still interested in railroads and what they're doing. Now, if you also figure the families of all these people, we're up to close to 5 million people. Now, that's a pretty big impact. But right there is where, and I get a lot into politics here. I sit over here and wonder what's happening at the legislature every once in a while. And I go in and try to talk with those folks. And I find that they feel about us that, well, why worry about the railroad? All they do is fight. And we've had that impression given to the public in the past because of the unions and the management, and they never seem to get along. Well, I think we're about to the point where that's going to change, too. And the politicians getting worried, because if we ever get together, he's got a problem. It's going to be a whole new world. Now we ask somebody to write a letter. Well, this one says we won't write it, and this gang does, but it's never the whole together. So we're working with the union people. They're beginning to see the importance of it, and management, too. They were sort of blind as to what we need getting together. I mentioned before an extemporaneous talk, and I believe that maybe we told this one at Rotary, but I want to tell you the story about the minister that talked extemporaneously all the time, and he was good at it, and he could give a subject, you just tell him something, and he'd relate it to the Bible and talk. So the Board of Deacons one day got kidding him about this, and he bragged about it so much, and he said, now I'll show you how good I am. He said, every Sunday, I won't know what you're going to do, but go up to the pulpit and put a word or two, and I'll just take that right there and give the sermon there. Whatever you write down. And they did, and boy, he performed. Every day, he related right to the Bible, and they couldn't believe it. Well, one day, one of the city deacons in there said, let's get him. Let's put a word up there that'll give him trouble. So they figured, we'll give him this word, constipation. And they wrote that down, and he walked up, you know, and took one look, and he said, well, today we're going to talk about Moses when he took the 2 tablets and went off into the wilderness. So I'd like to be an extemporaneous type speaker. I can't quite make it yet. Some more facts about our railroad business right today. We're one of the best paying industries that we have in the country. The average salary paid to a railroad worker today is $16,000 a year. Now on the Frisco, the one I'm with, it's $15,965 is the average. That's a lot of money. And we're also, you know, having more ladies in railroad business. Lady engineers, lady firemen, the few that are left, lady switchmen, lady brakemen, and they're doing a beautiful job. Now, the one thing we notice, there's an awful lot of the wives of our present employees that are coming in. So you have 2 in the family. The average salary is $16,000 a year. Now that's really where you're getting to be an important part of the economy. And so much of that's happening. We're very proud of the fact that in the railroad business, generally, when a family has one member in a railroad, on a railroad job, somebody else in the family comes in too. We have fathers and sons, and now even the daughters coming in. And that makes it, I don't see how we can argue. Maybe that makes it even easier to argue when you got the same members of the family in it. But this is, we're real proud of this aspect of railroading. Right at the moment, we're entering the merger picture. I see in the Wall Street Journal this morning that this is happening all over in other business too. But we're beginning to talk mergers more than we ever did. I mentioned we have 48 what we call Class 1 railroads today, the big ones. They can see in Congress a need for 12 railroads, and that's about where we'll be in the next 20 years, down to 12. But we're going to be highly competitive, and it's going to be a better thing. All these isolated smaller railroads they just can't make it on their own. Like the Rock Island and the Katy are pretty good evidence of that right now. Right now, we're trimming off excess fat. You'll see us pulling up lines. Every place where we don't use a portion of the railroad, we're going to take it up and turn it back to the original owners. All we do now is pay the taxes on it and the upkeep of it, and it doesn't do us any good, and it's an eyesore for the communities. So we're fast getting rid of all the excess package that we have. These great big old buildings that we used to use for our depots, where when we had passenger service, you had to have them. We'd have maybe 15 to 300 people working there. Now, all of our stations at the most will only have 10 or 12. Most of the time, 1 or 2. So we're getting rid of those great big old buildings that you can't heat in the winter and you can't cool them in the summer. And we're building these real nice little tin shacks, really, but they're very well insulated and they're air conditioned, and our people love them. But in those older, bigger buildings that were the old depots, most of those we're donating to the cities.
So you're doing to the Kansas City Union Station, for example?
Yes.
What's happening to it?
Well, that's still in use, Doug, pretty much, but a free enterprise outfit have taken it over.
It's a beautiful building.
Oh, it is. Quanta, Texas is the one now that we're going to give it to the city, I think, as a museum. there's 2 or 3 clubs and people just like you here that want to take it on as a place for a museum about the history of Texas in that area. And we can give them that building for $1.
How
Yes.
about St. Louis Depot?
The St. Louis Depot is still a pathetic situation. You know, there's a fight on. They want to make it a helicopter port.
It was a beautiful thing.
Oh, it still is, but it was so big, you know, and had a hotel in it and everything. And I mentioned we have 384 trains running in the whole United States today, each day. Well, Chicago and St. Louis had that many in and out every day in the good old days that I remember so well. But that St. Louis station has not, they haven't decided, it's a national monument more or less. They're not going to tear it down. But what to do with it is the next question. It's parking now mostly underneath, and I think 2 trains a day are free from in there, and that's all. But that helicopter might work, where you can have a helicopter from the airport come down, and that's right there at 18th Street near downtown. That might be a good use for it too, and then stimulate it and bring it back to life. But these big buildings that we have, if a city wants them, generally a railroad's delighted. And like the one at Tulsa, that's an eyesore if there ever was one. And nobody there seems interested in taking it over, and we hate to have to tear it down because when railroads build a building, they build it like it's going to be there 3,000 years. And to try and tear it down it costs as much as building a new one. So we're trying to get somebody over there interested in taking it on. We have a real good bid on this one right here. A company that's interested, and I don't know what they want to use it for, but they've made a bid that we're interested in, and so is the Rock Island. We own the local station here jointly. So maybe this will blossom out into something. It's a shame to have it sit down there with the windows, you know, boarded up. And we went in there and looked the other day, and there's not a piece of plumbing in it. Even the boilers are gone. Now, how they got out with those, I don't know. But, the boilers are gone. And we're fast learning how to get along with the public, finally. That was, I've been in this work now 3 years. First time we've ever done anything like this. My job is to go out into all these communities where we operate, go in and say hello to the mayor. He can't believe it. A railroad man coming in when he's not in trouble. And then we go to the chief of police and we talk with him, and we go to the city engineer, you know, the crossings now. Councilman McCullum got on me the other day about our crossings. And then some reporter fell in one of them down here on Leisure and Inflation. And I think we're going to fix that one. It is a mess. I went down and sunk into it myself, and it's horrible. But these sort of things where we're willing to go down and say, here we are, it's our fault or it's not, and at least talk to them about it. So railroads are learning this, and you're going to see a little more of that as we go, that they're not going to hide. You know, always when you went to ask anything of a railroad, they'd say, well, that's the superintendent and he's out in so-and-so. And when's he coming back? We don't know. Can you get a hold of him? No. Well, you know that's not right, because if you have a derailment, they can get him in 15 seconds. and he's right there. We're trying to establish some benchmarks now, so we know if we're making progress or falling back. And like the guy that had the jewelry store, and he had a little clock out in front, one of those that stand about that high in that big round, beautiful thing. And the owner noticed that every morning there was an old timer would come by, and he'd look at that and get his watch out, and he'd carefully set it right with the clock. They go down the street, so he went out one day and he said, see, I've noticed, I own this store, and he said, I noticed every day you're using my clock to set your watch, and we're glad to see you do that. And he said, yes, sir, thank you. He said, you know, I'm the fellow down here at the Duncan Company, and I blow that 5 o'clock whistle every night, and I have to be right. And the jeweler said, oh my goodness. He said, you know, every night I set that thing with your whistle. How many of you in here know anything about football? Do you follow football a little bit? Well, I heard the best story about a great big old bulky guy that wanted to be a quarterback. And the coach looked him over and said, now look, you ought to be on the line. You're too heavy for a quarterback. Well, he said, coach, I didn't want to be a quarterback. That's all he's doing. And the coach said, well, I'm sorry. And the kid said, now wait a minute. He said, you might not know this, but my uncle is on the Board of Regents, you know who he is? And he said my grandfather put an awful lot of money in this school. Well, the coach said, tell you what, maybe you are quarterback, I don't know, and we'll try to work that out, but now let's see, you just stick around, we'll work you in somehow. So the kid all year long, every day running up, you know, they play, wanting to get in as quarterback. They had a beautiful season, they won every game. They're down to the last game. They had a good quarterback and a good backup man, so they didn't have to call on this boy. They get down to the last game, the score's tied, there's a minute and a half to go, and the first thing happens, the good quarterback, they cart him off, he's knocked out. They're trying to get him to come to, put in the other good boy, and he breaks a leg, and they pull the poor guy out of the field, and he looks down the bench, and here's I'm ready, coach. So, the coach thought, well, we've had a beautiful season, we've won every game, we're tied here. If I can just get this guy to do what I tell him. He said, son, come here. Now, here's what I want you to do. You go in, there's only a minute left. And he says, you're on your 30-yard line, so do this. On the first play, take the ball and don't drop it. Hold it and make it run to the left side of the line. Get him back in quick. Make a run to the right side. And on the third play, he says, get it and kick it. Punch. You understand? Get there. I know what you mean. So he said, fine, get out there. And that kid ran out, you know, big old boy. He grabs the ball on the first play and runs to the left side, all the way down to their 35-yard line. Gets them back in. Bang! Hits the right side. He's down to the 10. Shot the ball back to him, and he kicked it clear over the backstop, down the street behind the gun went off, and the game's over. The coach is standing there grinning. When they trot back up, he says, son, come here. I want to ask you one thing. What were you thinking about when you kicked that ball out of the stadium? The kid said, I was thinking I'm probably working for the dumbest coach in the United States. I'd like to wind the talk up about talking about next year, but one other story I heard the other day, and you know, there's a place in Russia, the Georgian country, where people are known to live for years and years, and the average age is around 100. So they sent a bunch of young scientists over there, and they happened to walk in, and here they're celebrating 102nd birthday of this Russian man. And they went in and they got to talking with him. You're 102 years old? Yes, I'm 102. We'd like to talk to you a minute, okay? They said, now, during your lifetime, did you smoke very much? He said, well, no. He said, I tried smoking when I was about 15, never again. Well, he said, I guess that's why you lived to be this ripe old age. Yeah, that could be. How about drinking? Did you drink much in your life? Well, he said, no. I guess I've had 2 drinks in my whole life. Oh. Well, undoubtedly, they said, that's part of your longevity. Yeah, it could be. Now, he said, let's talk a minute about sex. How has that been in your lifetime? Well, he said, let me tell you something. I'm married to one woman for 89 years. Nothing like that on my mind, just a normal person. Well, I bet that's got something to do with your living 102 years. Yeah, it could be. Well, about that time, the door popped open. Cigarette smoke came out. Girls giggling all over the place. Glasses tinkling in there. And this one scientist said, what on earth's going on in there? Oh, he said, that's my father, and we can't do a thing with him. I'm going to leave some of these magazines here that some of you might want to look at. That's our Railway Age that talks about all the things that are going on in the railroad business, but there's a few that just are, you can't believe. One of the things going on over the world, and we're going to join it rather rapidly here after about the next 3 or 4 years, is to electrify the railroads. That's the way to really save the fuel, is to make them all run with electric power. So we're talking about the main lines only, where they don't have to depend on anything but electricity for their motion. The next thing is some new ways that we're going to handle trucks. They've invented a new truck that has on it not only the rubber wheels, but it has the steel wheel that can be dropped down and fit right onto the railroad. And these are beyond the area of experiment. They're now actively getting into the manufacture of the truck. They'll be ready to use them first at the end of 1978. Now, there's some restrictions in it. You couldn't mix it up with railroad cars because these trucks would be too light. When you stop, they'd get crushed. So when you run them, they're going to have to run all of them, all the trucks together. And here's what happens. No longer will we need that heavy car that they now drive the truck up on, you see, a flat car. We eliminate all of those, and that saves 1,700 tons per train. That's less fuel to be used. The next thing is, instead of needing 3 units of an engine, you only need 1 to pull all the trucks you can put back there. We figure probably they'll drag 150 trucks behind 1 locomotive. Tremendous savings in fuel. Then you go on down the line thinking about that when you don't need these great big yards like we have in Tulsa and on our line and at Memphis, where we have to segregate and switch all these cars out and trying to get them over where they can unload them. If you have trucks, you merely go in with your tractor and take the truck right off and it's gone. So we eliminate all of that heavy expenditure needed for big yards and the like. And one of the things I'm thinking about is if you can get all of this business moving on railroads that are now in the trucks on the highway, you save the upkeep of the highway. When you've got an 80 to 90,000 pound load bouncing across that highway every day, there's a little upkeep factor in there that sort of is the reason you read that they can't even replace the highways in this state like they should. If it was nothing but passenger automobiles, you wouldn't have that condition. Here's a chance, not because the railroad is going to make money out of it, but because it's a factor that's got to be reckoned with fuel usage. If 1 locomotive can pull 150 trucks across the United States and they're not burning fuel, just the engine is, you can begin to see the savings. We figured it out that on each trip it'll save 10,000 gallons of diesel fuel. Especially is that needed if we get in one of these wartime situations where you've got to have all of your fuel, your diesel fuel, and everything else will be going for the aircraft that we'll have to supply, and the necessary travel by air of the people. So here's something in the future that's coming that'll begin to cut costs just a little bit. I think another step ahead, how to handle passenger traffic. If you've got the railroad electrified, we don't need anything on a railroad above 23 feet because our tunnels stop us there. That's where a monorail is, about that height. So you can put the monorail over these railroads, and they'd run by the electric power also with speeds as high as 200 miles an hour, and you solve 2 questions. Now this is way out in the future, but they have, the monorails in Europe and Switzerland, and they've never had a fatality on the Switzerland monorail. And it's been in there, I guess, for 25, 30 years. Never stopped in a snowstorm, and they ain't get them over there in the Alps. So it is a great way to move the people, and we're going to be able, I think, to couple that in with the railroad's electrification. One other story, and then Doug will have a question or two, it's a quarter to. I heard Danny Thomas told this. I sneaked into Las Vegas and lost a few dollars and got out in a hurry, but I heard Danny while I was there. And he was talking about an old colored man that had lived in a town of 50 people all his life. And he had a bunch of children, and one of them was very successful in Chicago, and then invited the old gentleman up to Chicago. So he got up there, and of course he'd never seen anything like that. And he walked around, ooh-wee, ooh-wee, and he's looking at the big building. The first time he looked down in front of the Palmer House in the gutter, there was about $8.34, which he counted and picked up and put right in his pocket. And he got to thinking about it, and he thought, well, I wonder what those yellow things are running around here. Everybody's on and off of them, the buses. So he thought, I'll just get on one of them. I got money. And he got on the bus, and he was telling his son about it. He says, Father, or son, he says, that was the smartest bunch of people I've ever seen. He said, we go down there, and they holler out, Adams, and he said, we got up and got off. And he said, went a little farther, and he said, the man said, Randolph, and he said, Mr. Randolph, right behind you, got up and got off. And he says, you know, I was just thinking, they don't know me up here, I'm going for the whole ride. And he said, this about that time the man hollered, Monroe. And he said, boy, I got up, I got off. And he said, a big old car drove up and the man stuck his head out. I said, is this Monroe? And I said, yes. He said, I'm looking for 834. He said, by golly, I had to give it back to him. Well, the railroads are here to stay, and does anybody have any questions? We're about
Fire ahead. Yeah,
anything you'd like to know about them that... Well, yeah.
I got 15 minutes.
Oh, great. All right. I don't know what area you might... you know, all you hear is Penn Central, and gee, they're hollering for more money. Conrail is.
How about, you really believe that the passenger service is going to come back?
Yeah. I don't think there's any way out of it with the fuel situation like it is, Doug, but where we need passenger service first is in these heavy corridors of travel. Now, we've got a beautiful train between Chicago and St. Louis now, and they're averaging 80 miles an hour. They've upgraded the track. So this is the place you need it. This is where you can even relieve the congestion of the airports, and that's beginning to happen. O'Hare's overloaded, and so is Lambert Field at St. Louis. Well, all the wives, if their husband can get to Chicago out of St. Louis in 3 hours and a half and be right downtown, he's not going to let him fly. Because I used to fly that every week, and I couldn't make it in 3 hours and a half. If it's raining in Chicago, you're through. You get off your airplane and you're miles, you're 30 miles away from downtown, and you get in that awful highway, so it's better by train. So I think those kind of areas is where we'll start. Yes?
Yesterday I heard a report on Amtrak, and I have a son-in-law who works for Amtrak.
Mm-hmm.
I'm just wondering what's going to become of Amtrak.
Well, Amtrak is, it's a government, absolutely run by the government 100%. They just rent our rails. And Amtrak's going to be here. Because you never did find a government agency willing to drop anything that started and where they can spend some money. Their deficit is pretty bad, but they've ordered 2 trains from France.
Their equipment's bad, too.
Their equipment, but...
I was on it from New York to Salt Lake City
Mm-hmm.
last year, well, up to Denver, then to Rio Grande. But we had trouble with the equipment, and I said to the fellow that got on to repair it, I said, I bet this is 4 years old. He said, bet again.
Well, they're still using a lot of that old stuff that we gave them that we had left over. But they're replacing it real fast with brand new fine equipment. And most of it's double-decker, where you can go up and ride on the top deck and really see the countryside. And you know, if you ever want a thrill, we ride a lot on our railroad in the high rail car. That's a sedan, it's a Chevrolet station wagon with iron wheels, steel wheels rather, like I'm talking about these trucks are going to use. We just drive this car right up and drop the steel wheels down and take off on the railroad. And we were over running from Monette down to Fort Smith, and to get way back there where nobody ever sees, that railroad is in a place that nobody can get to. And the cows begin to look at you, you know, going by, and follow you all the way around, and the dogs bark. And the funny thing is, if you come up to a crossing, the public's attitude. They figure, what are you doing on there? And they'll go right in front of you, you know. You're not supposed to be on that railroad in an automobile. We had a lot of near misses, scared me to death, but it's really a lot of fun to ride and see that part of the world. We haven't seen it since the old passenger days.
Do they still run the congressional between Washington and New York?
I really don't know, but I would imagine that they've changed the name. It's probably still in there. They're dropping a few lines back there that didn't work out too well.
They used to always fight to get on that train.
Yeah.
It was always so. And I think some of the best times I ever had in my life was every year I used to go to Florida in February, and that Florida train we get on at Washington, D.C., and you have overnight and you go on down into Florida, and it was just one big picnic from the time you get on the train. It was really lovely. I have always loved trains. In fact, I was telling them last week that I don't like to fly, and I like trains, and I always will. But the last one I wanted to come from Florida up here,
No way.
it was going to take 36 hours to do it.
Well, they've got to tie this thing up a little bit. And for instance, if you go from here to Chicago, you land in Kansas City about 4 in the morning, and that's kind of awkward. You know, nobody there to meet you. But we're going to get more passenger trains as we go. And I think, you know, railroads need volume. Now, when the truck traffic gets to them, and it's coming with the fuel shortage, that's the beginning of really bringing them back where they can then afford to have passenger service with it. And I mentioned to Doug, railroads were crazy not to handle passenger service just as a public relations venture. Operate your passenger trains to show off your system and your railroad and charge it off as a needed thing for public relations. I believe that would have saved the day. Because now the kids don't know what you're talking about when you talk about train travel.
Some of the best service in the world was on those good passenger
Sure it
trains.
was. Yes, sir.
Have they ever done much with Martha with taking your automobile? The reason I ask, I've been to England a couple of times, and you get the night train to Edinburgh, by the way, and they have 4 or 5 cars with automobiles in them,
Mm-hmm.
and you sleep all night coming down to London, and go out in the parking lot, and there's your car after you get to London. You can do your errands and go back.
We've got one of those that runs the clock. But,
I counted 27 cars one night, automobiles.
well, it's remarkable. You know, there was a 3-month waiting list to get on that train that runs to Florida that we are. Now, we don't operate it. It's privately run. And it runs like the Amtrak service. And they had about 4 cars for automobiles in the back, and they turned it over one day. And oh, that was really, they thought they were going out of business. The loss was a little over $1.5 million, but it didn't hurt them that much. No, that's the coming thing, and people really would love that because, you know, maybe even one way. I don't mind driving, but to a point, say to the California, but I hate to think of having to go all the way back home. If you can just put your car on a train then and come on back in style, and we're going to have a lot of that. That's the way to run trains.
Well, now, did they sleep in their own cars?
No?
No, they sleep in a big, regular Pullman.
Oh, I see. And
Yeah,
then they have
no.
just cars for, well, I think that would be a wonderful idea.
Well,
I like that.
you know, when we move 52% of all the new cars built are moved on railroad. For the reason that we can handle 12 to 15 of them on one car, and trucks can only get about 7 or 8. And then everything works out that we can cut their costs. So where they're using 52% of all the cars are on a railroad. In those, we only allow 1.5 gallons of gas per car. Now, when you're talking about moving the public, you see, you have different things involved. They want a full tank of gas in there. All these things begin to be a factor. And they have to get government, OSHA and everybody else gets in it. So we've been through most of that, but we're going to get back in that sort of business. Absolutely.
Is there anything on the cutting board here to say have a monorail, like from Britain, downtown, we do a shuttle bus down to the city, from the station to the city? It would take care of so many cars.
Sure would. Some city's going to come up with that. We in Tulsa, we studied it when I was over there. And the monorail people, first off, our railroad runs right from the airport downtown in Oklahoma City, and it does the same thing in Tulsa. And in Tulsa, they could make it run in 8 minutes. Now, they were trying to promote the idea, put a monorail over to Frisco, and if we didn't like it, just tell us that's too bad, because really it's public convenience and necessity. And then put your waiting room for the airport downtown. If you want to make your downtown viable, and have people interested in coming there and being able to get Neiman Marcus and Marshall Field and all of them to put a store downtown, that's the way you have to do it. Then you'd have everybody that was waiting, you know, maybe 2-hour wait, they'd be downtown shopping. And your family, when they take, your wife takes you to the airport, she'd be downtown where there's lights and police and everything and safety. This sort of thing was really highly thought of, but you know, somewhere along the line, the bus company or somebody got in there and killed it. They didn't want that. And already now they're talking this same thing again with the bus lines are beginning to say, and the government's running out figures that it's cheaper to use buses for this kind of travel. But I don't believe that. I think monorail with their speed and the fact you could then make your city grow as you wanted it to, let your parking be way out there, run them downtown in a few minutes, and then go back and get their car and go home.
Well, I set my watch by your whistle.
Okay, Doug.
We want to thank you for coming. This group has a lot of fun. Well, you know, I was thinking about the changes in the only place it's not just taking place in the railroads. they're gonna blow up a big hotel downtown Sunday. The motels have taken the place of the, pretty largely the hotels. Lots of change. We gotta be flexible and adjust to it. Well, thanks a lot, Bruce, for coming, and we'll have coffee out.
All right, fine and dandy.
If you have any questions, speak to him out here.
Thank you so much, sir.
You're welcome.
I'm glad to get this. This is Mary B. Roberts signing off. The speaker, Mr. Bruce Mahon of the Santa Fe Railroad System, has spoken to us on the railroad systems of Oklahoma City and the United States, the future of the railroad. Thank you.